Alright, question 3b asks us to write the method find max and min. Takes an array of scores as a parameter and returns an array of length 2, where the first element is the maximum value in scores and the second element is the minimum value in scores. And complete the method find max and min below. So I know that this method is supposed to return an array of 2 values. The first one is supposed to be the maximum value and the second element is supposed to be the minimum value. Okay, and those were the maximum minimum found in the array that they give us. So the method header, as you can see on your paper, is public static int array. So this is telling me I need to return an integer array, as we say down here. And I'm going to say find max and min. And all it takes in is the array of scores, which they call scores. Again, that each score is an integer. So not much new information given in the comment there above the method. It does give us the precondition that scores.length is greater than 0. That means we don't have to worry about what if there are no scores. What are we supposed to return then? So there are definitely going to be at least one score in the list. And they also tell us that 0 is less than or equal to scores at position k. In other words, pick any position in the list. The score is going to be somewhere within that acceptable range of 0 to 100. So you don't have to worry about getting a negative score or a score bigger than 100. Anything out of the boundaries of the judges' scores, those won't be included in the list. Okay, so since we know that it's not empty, we don't have to worry about putting any type of check to see if it's null or if the size of the length is, or if the length of the array is 0, anything like that. So what we need to do is we need to first off establish some way of storing the maximum and minimum values. And we want to return an integer array, so 2 elements in an array. So at the beginning of this method, we'll go ahead and just declare an array of integers. We could call it whatever we want. Since it's storing the max and the min, I could call it max and min, something like that. Just a little bit different. Notice I'm not giving it the identical name to the method, but I am giving it somewhat of a similar name, something that is obvious what it means. And I don't know what those are yet, but I do know that it is going to be a, whoops, let me erase this for a second. I do know that the array is only going to hold 2 items, the maximum and the minimum. So I want to say that that equals a new array of integers. And remember how this works. So you use the same notation used up here, but inside the brackets, you actually tell how many elements are going to be in that array. Right? If it's ever something where you don't know how many are going to be in there yet, if you don't know how big the array needs to be, then that's probably a good idea or a good indicator that you could use an array list. Okay, but here we're told there are only ever going to be 2 elements. That's not going to change. So I'm going to go ahead and build this with a regular standard integer array that holds 2 elements. Okay, so that sets up space for two integers in an array over in memory. So then I want to go ahead and establish these values from the beginning. So I want to say, come up with the sort of initial values for the maximum and the minimum. So if I want to access the maximum, that's position 0 of the array. So the name of the array at position 0. And I either want to pick a really small value, sort of like the current minimum value that I know as I go through the list, it can't be smaller than this, but more than likely a value is going to come up that is bigger than this. So for instance, if all the scores are from 0 to 100, I could set the max equal to 0, and then the first time I found a score that's bigger than 0, change the max. Say, alright, now the max equals this, maybe it's a 70 or something like that, and then I come across an 85 and I change max to equal 85 and so on. So I could set it something really small, or I could simply set it to the first value in the array of scores. Okay, remember, scores is the actual scores we're going to be searching. And by setting the maximum, again, which was at position 0 of the array we just made, by setting that maximum equal to the first score, I'm guaranteed that I'm coming up with a value that is in the list. And then if I come across any other value in the list of scores that's bigger, I'll just change this. I can do the exact same thing with the minimum value. Either set it to something really big, in this case 100 will be the largest possible score. Remember, the minimum is scored at position 1. These positions, index 0, index 1, position 1 will be the minimum. But I'm going to set it equal to the first score as well. And again, just as soon as I come across a next score that's smaller than that, if there is one that's smaller, I'll change it. Okay. So now I want to simply go through the list. Since I'm simply accessing information and accessing scores directly, I could use a for each loop, or I could use a standard for loop. Either one works. I want to use a for each loop again, just to make sure we know how this works. So if I want to access each score, I could say for each integer, again, because scores is an array of integers, call the current score S in the list called scores. Again, this is the name of the array we're searching. And the colons just tell us, like, for each one of these in this list. What do I want to do? If the current score is bigger than the current maximum, I want to update the maximum. If the current score is smaller than the minimum, I want to update the current minimum. And I want to do that for each score. So what I could do is I could say if S is bigger than the maximum, remember the maximum is at position 0. So I could say if, go to the array max and min, look at the first, or position 0, which holds the maximum value. If S, the current score, is bigger than that, update this to equal that current value. So maybe the first score in the list, position 0, was 50. And then we come across the next score and it's a 60. We want to update it. So we're going to go to max and min at position 0, which holds the maximum, and set it equal to the new one that is bigger. Then I want to do the same thing for, that's the only thing I want to do if it was bigger. Then I want to use another if statement and say, what if the current one is smaller, so it's less than the minimum? Well, then I want to go to the minimum value at position 1 and change it to equal the current value. Okay, so I'm going to put little braces here just to separate this. I don't have to, but just to kind of show that each of these is only going to be implemented if the current if statement is true. All right, so I have those two if statements. If it's not bigger than the biggest or smaller than the minimum, then I don't want to do anything. So that's all I really need to do in my for loop. Okay, but now we've gone through, we've updated it. By the time we reach the end, we have the accurate maximum and the accurate minimum values. So I simply want to return this array that has been updated. And to do that, we just return the name of the array. So max and min, not just one value. Like I don't want to say 0 or 0, 1 or anything like that. I actually want to return the whole array, which is both values. Okay. And then my method's done. So at this point, we found the maximum, we found the minimum, stored them in an array called max and min, and then we return that array at the end, like we were supposed to, as we could see the method header, to return the maximum in the first position, minimum in the second, and we're done. So now I'm going to the last part, where you write the method average score. It uses the methods we've written so far to determine what the average score would be for the contestant.